What's good with it, Black Goose TV family, man? Double salute as always. Your boy Fluence Boxing is back in the building once again with some more Fluence Boxing news. And what are we going to be talking about in this particular video? As y'all can see over here, coming from BoxingScene.com, we've had a mandatory title fight ordered by the WBA, and it's coming in the likes of Stannionis versus Virgil Ortiz. Now, what is the reason for me reporting this? What is the reason for me talking to the Black Goose TV family about this? One, because I think if this fight actually happens, it's a fire fight. If this fight actually takes place, it's a very competitive fight. It's a very close fight, in my personal opinion. It's coming from two undefeated fighters, two up-and-coming undefeated fighters in the 147 division. So I think if this actually does end up taking place, if there's actually a purse bid, if a date is put into place, we are going to have a fire fight at the 147 division for next year. And I'm going to tell you this right now. We have some pretty big fights lined up for next year, which I'm very excited about if they actually end up going through and happening. Now, there's also another reason why I want to talk about this, not only because I think this is a fire fight, not only do I think this is a great fight, not only think this is a competitive fight, but I also want to go ahead and put on my conspiracy theory hat. Why am I putting on my conspiracy theory hat? Well, let me get into that. Now, if you guys don't know, Stannionis is a very top level contender when it comes to the 147 division. He's a guy, in my personal opinion, that you can definitely put in the likes of or say his name in the same category as a Virgil Ortiz and a Jaron Ennis when it comes to the future of the welterweight division, right? The thing about Stannionis is he's not as known when it comes to the American fan base. So what am I getting at? What am I saying? Well, if you guys don't know, obviously you guys should know because it was the topic of conversation for at least the most of 2022 and still is. Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence was supposed to happen before the end of this year. I was one of the few YouTubers who tried to bring everyone down to earth, try to give you guys a more realistic approach, a realistic opinion on the situation, and said, guys, this fight is not going to happen. Let's be real. If anything, the fight's going to happen in 2023, but 2022, it doesn't make sense. Well, lo and behold, I've been proven right. A lot of you guys are not going to admit that because obviously I'm on the smaller YouTube channel side of the game. But either way, that's what I'm saying. Like, subscribe, support, show some love so we can get on that bigger scale so you guys can be like, hey, yo, look, Fluence has been telling you from day one. He's the most unbiased. He's the most grounded YouTuber when it comes to this boxing shit because he gives you the real and he gives you the deal. And you don't got time to feed y'all hungry ass niggas because I ain't paying for your meals. So with that being the case, I'm telling y'all, Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence obviously did not take place. Now, why am I speaking about a particular fight that a lot of people are saying has nothing to do with Stannionis versus Virgil Ortiz being ordered by the WBA? Well, now here comes the conspiracy theory side of the game. If you guys don't know, with Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence falling through, there was a mandatory by the name of Stannionis for a certain fighter by the name of Errol Spence. So with Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence falling through, there was a mandatory, I believe it's for the WBO, where Stannionis was sitting there saying, hey, Earl, you didn't get the Terrence Crawford fight. It's time. Let's make it happen. And we all know Stannionis wanted that fight. He's been calling for this fight all year. If you guys don't pay attention, well, it's time to start paying attention because Stannionis is a guy who's been saying, I want Errol Spence the truth. Let's make it happen. I'm the mandatory. He even went as far as him being in a position where they're saying, we're going to offer you step-aside money. And Stannionis said, no, I'm not taking step-aside money. I want to fight with Earl. Now, let me bring all this into full circle. As we know, it was ordered by the WBC. Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman. Interesting. As we also know, Keith Thurman versus Errol Spence doesn't seem likely to happen, or it doesn't seem like Errol Spence is going to take that fight. I might be wrong. I don't know. It's been crickets when it comes to that. You know, people are saying Keith Thurman is fighting. He's getting in shape. He's getting ready for the Errol Spence fight. We haven't really heard anything from Errol Spence side on whether or not they're going to go ahead and come through with this fight. But all I am saying is Stannionis was a mandatory to Errol Spence before Keith Thurman got announced by the WBC as the mandatory for Errol Spence. So my conspiracy theory hat is coming on, and I'm saying, are they doing everything in their power to keep Stannionis away from Errol Spence? I'm not saying Stannionis is better. I'm not saying he can easily wipe the floor with Earl, but he's a dangerous opponent. He's an up-and-comer. He's not really known like that in the States, and it is a very big risk for Earl to take a chance like that against someone like Stannionis. They much more prefer him to fight someone like Keith Thurman, who's more on the end of his career, even though he still has a lot of his prime left. He's still in great shape, still has big punch power, but he's in the PBC camp. He's more known among American fans. Obviously, there's much more money in that than there is Stannionis versus Errol Spence, and there's a much a higher risk. So that's where my conspiracy hat now comes on, and I kind of, you know, mesh everything together, or I connect the dots where I'm saying it's very interesting out of nowhere. Stannionis versus Virgil Ortiz mandatory title fight ordered by WBA. Look, when's the last time I seen a mandatory title fight ordered by the WBA take place? I don't know. No one really cares when it comes to WBA. No one really listens to it. But I think this is a good diversion. I think this is a good way to bring something up where it kind of keeps you away from even looking at the fact that Stannionis has been sitting in the blocks and been waiting because he's a mandatory for Errol Spence and another belt. Also, he's been saying he's not going to take the step-aside money. So this is a good way to kind of throw the wrench in there and be like, well, those are two up-and-comers. Like, yeah, I'd rather see Stannionis, Errol Spence fanboys and stuff. I'd rather see Stannionis versus Virgil Ortiz because they're both unproven. Why should Errol Spence take this fight, etc.? So, I just wanted to put all that into perspective. I just wanted to tell y'all how I'm feeling and, what I'm saying, my personal outlook on the situation. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this article coming from boxingscene.com. Obviously, let me know what you guys think about the situation before we get into the article, man. Hit the like button below. Right next to it is the subscribe channel. Obviously, comment on this joint. Get me in the algorithm. Show some love. Road to 5K before the end of the year. You already know what it is. So, Stannionis has spent the past several weeks targeting the unbeaten welterweight from the greater Dallas area for his next fight. Once again, Stannionis has spent the past several weeks targeting an unbeaten welterweight from the greater Dallas area for his next fight. Such a fight could materialize, even if not against the fighter that the secondary titleist had in mind. Boxing Scene has confirmed the WBA has ordered a mandatory title fight between Lithuania's Stannionis, 14-0, 9 KOs, 1 no decision, and Virgil Ortiz Jr., 19-0, 19 KOs, the undefeated knockout artist from Grand Prairie, Texas. The order comes 2 days after the November 16 deadline in place for Stannionis to have secured a voluntary defense of a WBA regular title. The two sides will have 30 days to negotiate terms for a fight that is officially due to take place on January 16th. Stannionis is represented by promoter Richard Schaefer and his Probellum company, along with manager Shelly Finkel. Ortiz fights for Golden Boy Promotion and is managed by Rick Merrigan. The orders come after both fighters pushed for the WBA to enforce their specific status, as previously reported. Ortiz petitioned the WBA to order a fight with Stannionis as a section embodies mandatory challenger. Meanwhile, Stannionis pushed for a title consolidation clash with WBA super champ Errol Spence Jr., the unbeaten DeSoto, Texas native who also holds the WBC and IBF titles. Stannionis spoke up on having the fight ordered once plans collapsed for a discussed undisputed championship between Spence and WBO welterweight title holder Terrence Crawford. Stannionis was joined by unbeaten welterweight contender Jerome Boots Ennis, who sought to have his IBF mandatory status enforced for a similar fight. It appears that neither will land a fight with Spence. There is a chance that Ennis could be approved to fight for an interim IBF title should Spence not immediately let go of the belt outright. Meanwhile, a decision will need to be made whether Spence can keep his WBA super title or if Stannionis will be upgraded and recognized as a lone WBA welterweight title claimant. Stannionis won the belt in a 12-round decision over Razab Butiev on April 16th at AT&T Stadium, home to the NFL's Dallas Cowboys in Arlington, Texas. The bout aired on Showtime, preceding a pay-per-view telecast headlined by Spence 10th round stoppage of Ugas in the 3-belt unification bout. Spence Ugas took place only because of Stannionis, who agreed to step aside in exchange for getting a shot at the winner. The 2016 Olympian for Lithuania once again stood down while Spence Crawford talks were underway, as all parties agreed that the fight served the greater good for the sport. So, it seems like my conspiracy theory hat is actually right. So, Stannionis, he took step-aside money for Spence Ugas, was promised the winner of that. They said, hey, look, I know we promised you the winner of that, but Spence Crawford is supposed to happen now. So will you take some more step-aside money? And he said, okay. But now since Spence Crawford, the fight hasn't happened, you can see now Stannionis is like, yo, look, it's my time. Give me the fight with Earl, which is very interesting now that all of a sudden the WBA is ordering him versus Virgil Ortiz. They do not want that man to fight Earl. That concession dried up the moment Spence was and remains left without an opponent. However, between the WBA order as well as Philadelphia's Ennis likely to fight in January, it is very likely that Spence moves forward with his WBC ordered mandatory title fight against former unified titleist Keith Thurman. I still don't think that's going to happen. Ortiz advanced to the mandatory position for Stannionis' version of the title following a 9th round knockout of McKinnison. Their August 13th clash of unbeaten welterweights was a sanctioned WBA title eliminator, specifically next to challenge Stannionis in a ruling that can only make sense to the WBA staff, who long ago thought it was wise to create multiple versions of its title. So limbo. People going right up under that rail, man. If you want me to be 100 with you, man, all this is shady, all this is dumb. In my personal opinion, we should be having Stannionis versus Errol Spence, since Errol Spence obviously and his team promised him the fight, the winner of Ugas versus Spence Terrence Crawford came into play. He was like, Stannionis' team was like, I get it. I'll take step aside money again. But since the fight's not happening, it doesn't make sense why it's not Errol Spence for Stannionis. I know they're saying because the WBC ordered Keith Thurman versus Earl, that's what's going to end up taking place. I still don't think that fight's going to happen. It's a little too risky for Earl, in my personal opinion, but we'll see. As of now, we haven't had any leeway. We haven't had any advances, any updates on Spence versus Keith Thurman happening, other than supposedly Keith Thurman is training for whatever reason. But Keith Thurman has been training. If you've been following Keith Thurman, he has been training this entire year as if he has a fight coming up the next week. So what do you guys think about this whole entire situation, man? Make sure you guys hit the like button. Make sure you guys subscribe below on the motherfucking channel. Show some love. Be part of the BlakGooseTV family. Notification game. Road to 5K before the end of the year, man. On the Schwarzenegger side of the game, I'll be back, but with more boxing. Stay blessed, not stressed. You already know what type of time we on. Much love to people. Keep supporting the channel. I'm out for now.